Thanks for listening to the Clive Barker Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the imagination of Clive Barker. If you get a chance, subscribe and rate us. You know you want to, but you just keep saying you'll do it later. It's later now! Okay, so this episode 187 is a return to Marvel epic Hellraiser book 20, which has Neil Gaiman, the Hellraiser III adaptation, and the Spring Slaughter special. So please read along or give us a listen as we dive deep into the Hellraiser comic mythos.
Hello and welcome back to the BarkerCast. This is episode 187, Marvel Hellraiser Part 7. As usual, I'm Joe.
And I'm Ryan.
And here we are, the last issue of Clive Barker's Hellraiser, right? We're going to be talking about issue number 20, the Hellraiser 3 adaptation, and the Spring Slaughter. So It was a special for the Hellraiser series. And that was a heck of a closing issue, number 20, though.
Yeah, and did I miss it? Was there no discussion at all on, like, no letters or anything on that?
Nope, that was pretty much it, yeah.
Yeah, it would have been nice for them to, like, say goodbye, you know.
I think they did say goodbye on the previous issue. They were announcing, Hellraiser was going to start the miniseries with Gene Colan, who was like a classic artist. He did lots of Dracula comic books and stuff like that. So I really like how they were trying to spin off things off of the Hellraiser and starting its own little universe. And I wish that it had continued, that expanded. And so the Hellraisers, at its source, I guess it was an interesting idea, like the fact that they would have this group of people who would actively fight against the Cenobites to rescue people from hell. But it seems like the mechanic of the Hellraisers was kind of repetitive. It's like, okay, we're just going to slice our way into a portal into hell, grab someone, bring them back, and then they're going to have 24 hours until they turn into someone else.
Yeah. And
I figure after a while that would be old if you didn't do anything more interesting. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to go to that series because I don't think I've read them, or not all of them. I think I've read a couple.
It was good. I mean, the art was good. Like I said, Gene Colan did a lot of issues, and then the first cover, the issue number 1 had like a glow in the dark cover, like Pinhead's face would glow in the dark. So that was cool. Yeah. So the first story of issue number 20 is Wordsworth, right?
Yeah, and Wordsworth was written by Neil Gaiman, drawn by Dave McKean. So it was for Sandman fans out there. It's like that's the ultimate artist that you want with a Neil Gaiman story.
Oh yeah, they make such a great duo. Dave McKean also went on to make this awesome graphic novel series called Cages, and Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean worked together in a couple of other things like Violent Cases and Signal to Noise. Great stuff that I own, and I totally recommend that you buy those graphic novels because they're really, really groundbreaking. To use kind of a cliched expression, it breaks new ground in like the comic book field because it makes Dave McKean is pretty much, I wouldn't call him a comic book artist. He's just an artist. It's not that I'm dismissing being a comic book artist as anything inferior. It's just that it's a completely different way of making the page. It's not sequential art. It's not like Will Eisner's sequential art. It's more like create this canvas for each page, and it's truly amazing for this story.
Yeah, really good. But before that story, there's a weird pinup that's like a bookend, and it's like this guy sitting on a subway train, and Pinhead shows up and shoots chains at him.
Yeah. Yeah, that was done by Shawn Martinbro. I don't know if this was part, again, sometimes these pinups seem like they're part of a story that just is missing the little bubbles,
Yeah, right.
So I don't know if that was supposed to be some sort of story that they just use the pages, but it's really, really nice. I really enjoy these front and end pieces. And there's one after that opening, there's another illustration of this kind of crouching figure. and it's made by George Pratt. And George Pratt also made this Wolverine miniseries called Netsuke.
Oh.
Which is about these little wooden sculptures that people make in Japan. I believe they're called Netsuke. I don't know if you ever heard about that, Ryan, because you're the Japanese expert here. So
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it's a really good pinup. I would totally get that as a poster.
Yeah, it's cool. And then so we get into Wordsworth, and it starts out with a guy just doing a basic like crossword puzzle. He's sitting on. Is he on a train or like at a cafe?
I think he's on a train, right?
Yeah.
He's solving the Daily Telegraph puzzle, and he solves it in 6 minutes and 12 seconds. Apparently, he's timing himself.
Yeah.
Because he's very competitive. And then a stranger is in front of him and says, "Oh, you like puzzles?"
Yeah.
Of course, we know where this is going, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. You finished puzzle. It's like, oh yeah, the crossword. Yeah. I was like, words. It's like. Yes, crosswords have words. Like, you need good puzzle. Boom. And it just gives him a puzzle and leaves.
Yeah.
And of course the man is like all like warped and his face is kind of like demonic, and you can tell, oh, that's a puzzle guardian, right?
Yeah. And this is interesting because it seems like the just a kind of quick synopsis of what happens here is that these puzzles that he's solving, the solutions to find the solutions, he has to do more and more terrible things. And so this puzzle sort of chronicles his descent into hell and his descent into maybe madness, but it solves this issue of like somebody hands a person a puzzle. That's not really fair, that all they did was solve a puzzle. What are they doing going to hell? This kind of answers that question with, well,
I agree.
Solving the puzzle,
involves starting the first step on that road to damnation, right?
Yeah. And they're going there willingly. I mean, they're doing this stuff, these terrible things.
Mm-hmm. So the man is clearly a puzzle guardian, and the clues for the puzzle, like you were talking, are for very personal, private recollections or things that are yet to happen or things that he needs to do in order to find the answer. And so he undergoes stuff like bondage and piercing. He dines with coprophiliacs to find out what the last item on their dinner menu is, which is, of course, coffee. So that's kind of a joke there. He didn't have to go through the whole thing. Yeah. And he murders, he cannibalizes, and violates, and he goes down this spiral of damnation that kind of mirrors the spiral of the crossword puzzle that he gets. It's kind of a spiral. Yeah, you notice that. Yeah. And finally, the last one is the doorway. And the answer for that is hell. So, yep. The puzzle kind of burns and opens a hole across the schism, and he's delivered upon the other side, and he's turned into a Cenobite with his skin is covered in words, right?
Yeah. And, this is, and it says "love me" across his chest, and he's got like a kind of a skull face or half skull. Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, really eerie looking, really cool. I think normally Dave McKean mostly does covers for Sandman, right?
Yeah, that's how he got started with Neil Gaiman's collaboration. And he started out doing lots of stuff. I mean, he's done movies and everything. You may have seen The Mirror Mask. Have you ever seen that movie?
Jim Henson, yeah.
Right. So that's totally based off of Dave McKean's artwork. And but Wordsworth, he's kind of like this bard of hell, right? I mean, he's someone who kind of seduces the damned with words. He can turn their hope into despair, or their despair into hope, I guess. Yeah. Because words can change someone's perception, and as such, they have this remote effect that's almost magical. Like when you're reading a book, and you get chills when you read a page by Clive Barker sometimes, and it's like, wow, well, how is that happening, right?
Yeah.
It's just happening because that's the magic of words. You ever since the first caveman came up with a grunt that means something, that's when we discovered, hey, you know what? We can tell other people what we're thinking, and we can like organize and draw knowledge and accumulate knowledge. And then, of course, when writing came in, that totally was a game changer, because oral tradition relied on people transmitting the knowledge from one generation to the next just through stories
and memory. Yeah.
And memory. And now after you get writing, now you can just write it and forget it and put it in the pile, and it's there forever, So yeah, and so that's the magic of words. We use the word spell, right, to indicate magic. And so it's like it's a way to break the reel with words and power. So I think that's what they try to mean here. That's his function in hell. He says that he keeps the damned tenderly, expressing them with his tangled flesh and tattered tongue, words that form stories or tales or patterns, words that can but hint at the delights of damnation, of the ultimate pleasures that wait for them all on the beyond side of pain. So yeah, he's kind of a seducer of the damned. I think that's his role in hell.
This is another one of those that kind of makes me wish there were a Hellraiser anthology TV series.
Uh-huh.
I think that would be really cool if they could do something like that on cable, or like, Netflix or something like that, where they're not bound by, by ratings and, or like,
I understand.
Yeah. Yeah, and
that's the thing.
There's so much there in the comics. I mean, so we've talked about some of these stories aren't our favorites, and some of them aren't great, but a lot of them are really amazing and would be great. Little 1 hour short stories.
Sure. I mean, Heckle's Tale is like 1 hour, and it's it's how many pages was that for Clive Barker? It was like 30 pages, 37, something like that. So yeah, it's possible. This story it ended up in the Masterpiece compilations, right? And it also ended up in Hellbound Hearts.
Yeah. So in audio, or like just a written text version of it.
No, it actually was printed. The pages were printed in black and white. Yeah, which kind of diminishes it just a little bit, because without the color, it takes away something from it. Yeah. But they included it there, and it was one heck of an addition to Hellbound Hearts for people who didn't have this issue of Hellraiser. So
I had forgotten that was in there. I think maybe I just skimmed through it because I already had the comic.
Right, you're right, yeah. But this reminded me. I don't know. I looked around for it. If I could, I would add it to the show notes. But this reminded me of a cartoon I saw once. It was about this little guy trapped in a crossword puzzle cell, where all the 6 walls of the cell were crosswords, and he had to fill it in.
Oh.
And then once he filled everything in, he would serve his sentence. And then he says that he spent years doing that, and he just, every single waking moment, he would just be trying to figure out how to fill all of that. And then once he did, it opened 2 doors. One door went to the outside. Another door opens towards a new cell. And at that point, he just decided to go back into another cell and start again.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a 4-page panel comic book cartoon, and I wish I knew where I found it, because it was on the internet. But I have it saved somewhere, but I tried looking for it. I couldn't find it. So if someone out there knows what I'm talking about, please send us a copy of the cartoon, because I forgot about it.
Jeez. I guess that says something about, people's obsession with crossword puzzles.
Oh, yeah.
And after that, we have a pinup of this weird, like, lizard cyborg monster with a couple of guys, and one of them has a puzzle box.
Yeah. This I barely connected to Hellraiser. It's just that one guy kneeling, holding a box that seems to make this connected to Hellraiser. Again, no idea what the guy was thinking when he made this, but I'm gonna hazard that some of these people were just pitching ideas for stories, maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know how this giant cyborg kaiju could have anything to do with Hellraiser.
Right.
It would be hard.
Yeah. Yep, and then we've got The Girl in the Peephole. So this is an interesting one. It takes place in an insane asylum, but they talk about the lower floor. They call it hell, And so it makes me wonder, I mean, it seems like at the time that they're saying figuratively, but I wonder if it's, if there's something else to it.
Well, yeah. So the main protagonist is Arthur Smack, and he comes to Mercedic Institute of Mental Health. And of course, he's looking for some source of meaning for his life. And I think more than that, he's hoping for some sort of redemption for his compulsions by helping others. His compulsion being, of course, that he's a sexual desire for children. But nobody seems to know. I mean, we live in a universe here in this story where apparently the sex offender registry isn't a thing that exists, because this guy is working for a hospital. I'm sure they would do a background check. But, moving on from that. So, yeah, like you said, there was a ward called Ward S. And I don't know, man. It seems like it's actually hell.
I know, yeah, and because the nurses and stuff would be in on it, or the doctors. And
the nurse looks like a demon, and it's one of those stories that has this kind of fantasy vibe to it. So, Ward S. I don't know if the S had any sort of meaning. I mean, I couldn't find any sort of meaning for the S. Maybe I'm just missing something obvious, but anyway, so the nurse there, when they go into Ward S, she's strangling a patient. She's like choking him out. And the director says something like, that's Mr. Miller. He requires a strict regimen of ritualized punishment. His pain keeps him alive spiritually. And so, as if anybody would, ever do that. Yeah. So, but then he says, but we have other people in this Ward S that are truly terrible people, and we have very, very bad guests in this ward. One of them is Rachel. Yeah. And it's kind of a vibe that takes me to Hellraiser 2, like that little basement that Chenard had.
Yeah,
right?
I was thinking of that too.
Yeah.
And even beyond that, it seems like this little cell with Rachel in it, it's got a puzzle to solve. To get in the door, and it seems like she's in there just for the purpose of tempting him.
Oh yeah. And it might be the easiest puzzle in the world too. I mean,
oh my god, I know. I was like, "What? Are you kidding me?" I mean, like a 5-year-old could solve that.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But that may be on purpose, I guess, because the real thing here is for Mr. Smack to be able to fight his desire, but of course we know he's going to give in, because this is a Hellraiser story. I mean, if he didn't give in, there wouldn't be a story to tell. But so Rachel, when he looks into the peephole, because her cell has a little peephole that people can look through, she's a little girl in a cell, and she connects with Smack's fantasies almost right away, right? Yeah. He's told by the Cenobite nurse, I'm going to call her that this little girl has designed horrible things, and that's why she's in a cell. And I have the combination to the lock, and I'm the only person who may open this door. And of course, that seems like ridiculous once you look at the puzzle. It's just a series of concentric rings, and they make this word called love. So you have the letters are just
3 rings, so it's really, really obvious how to.
Yeah. So that's the whole point. It's to tempt him, and of course we know he's gonna. And she says, "You can't touch her. You can't open the door. You can't touch her." But then one day he's giving her the food under the table, the door, right? Yeah. And she touches him, and it sets him off completely. One touch throws him into paroxysms of fantasy and lust, you know, and he's totally lost. Now he has to gain access to her cell, and her touch is kind of addictive to him. So every time he just starts figuring out how to open that 3-ring puzzle, which again is super easy.
Well, and at first he resists, and he runs away when she touches him, and he goes home and calls in sick for a while.
Yeah, that's true.
But then when he comes back, it seems like he's kind of turned a corner, and he's given up on resisting.
Right, and he just lets her touch his hand again, and is like, he must have her. So he just goes ahead and says here, for days, then weeks, he moves the rings, hoping the lock will yield its secrets. Again.
Oh, come on. I know. It's like, jeez.
Right? 3 rings that make the word love. It's
that would take about 10 seconds.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's pretend like this is kind of metaphorical,
Yeah.
and then one day he figures it out, and the door opens, and he's like suddenly sucked into this portal that goes into hell.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's I like this part. Like he finds himself falling into hell, where everyone is him, and everybody's falling down into hell, and there's all these people just falling down from similar portals that he came through, and the nurse is there, and she's like a demon, right? She's like torturing all these people. She's puking on top of them, stomping them, picking them up with her like tentacles and stuff, and just torturing everybody. And she says, "There's no way out. You're not different from any of my other people here. After all, they're all you." So she's like torturing him for all eternity in all different forms. And he sees a rock, and Rachel's atop of that rock in the middle of this roiling lake of blood. And she says, "Come to me, Arthur. I know the way out." And of course, we know it's false hope, right?
Yeah, yeah. They're kissing, and she bites his face off.
Yeah, she rips his face off with her mouth, and again, she kind of consumes him in a way, right?
Yeah.
And
there's a good splash panel of a whole page one of her, taking all of his skin off, and he's going, "Hey."
Yeah, it's a good imitation of The Damned. Anyway, so the next page shows Rachel delivering a baby with a Cenobite nurse, and so she brings him up, and the baby is deformed, and he's got these like tentacles around his body, kind of writhing tentacles. And she said, "It's a beautiful child, Rachel. I guess it's a boy, but I can never be sure about your children."
Yeah.
And then it focuses into his eyes, and
it says, "It's eyes, Rachel. It's eyes," kind of like Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, what's wrong with his eyes?
Yeah.
So it says that the eyes have they're like peepholes to the soul, and you look at the eyes, and there's a close up on it. It says the iris has the same defect as Mr. Smack's, which is basically a small triangular defect under the pupil. Kind of makes it look like a keyhole, and it's implied that Smack's been reborn into a world of agony in that baby, because they say that pain is given to every living thing at birth, and that death is sometimes a release from pain, but sometimes death is only the beginning. So it makes it seem like these people who are tempted by Rachel end up being reborn as babies, and deformed babies that forever, suffer in agony in hell.
Right, yeah. So it's sort of a meta hell, right? Because he's got the one hell that he fell into, and she ripped his skin off, and then here's the other one where he's reborn as this weird baby.
Yeah. It seems like he doesn't even have a mouth, right? Because the mouth that we see, the lips, they're just two tentacles,
right?
Circling around the space where the mouth should be. So that's why the baby's just like groaning and humming.
Yeah.
That's very, very creepy story. Very creepy story.
Right. It is. And then we have the last laugh, which is two comedians. This is. Did you kind of feel a little disappointed? Like when you start out with Wordsworth, it's like, why is the opening act so much better than the,
I know.
than the two that follow?
This should have been the opening one, right?
Yeah.
This should have been open in hell.
And these comedians are terrible. I mean, their jokes are so bad.
Yeah, I think it's all part of I think that's why they're in hell, really.
Yeah, I know. Is that fair? I mean, I don't know.
I think it's fair because their jokes suck, dude. Yeah. So it's like opens to Le Marchand, the comedy club in hell. So Stephen Marty Fanoli, and I think it's funny that their word Fanoli.
Yeah.
It's supposed to have fun in it.
Right.
Is that smart, I guess?
Yeah.
They're in the dressing room, so they're getting ready to go out and entertain a crowd, except it's a Cenobite crowd, right?
Yeah.
And one of the
And everybody hates them. But they still go to see them anyway.
And there's a bartender, and the Cenobites are ordering, "Hey, bartender, a couple of shots of puss."
Yeah.
So, okay. So the comedians are coming on stage, and they're going to crack bad jokes. So when that happens, they're going to be chained off stage.
Yeah, blood everywhere.
Yeah, I can say one of their jokes, the one that they use just before they're chained back into backstage. So what exactly is a Cenobite, Marty? A mess o' trouble.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then it's they're chained. They're like, please God, no, I can't take this again. So they're, wait, if you don't like those, we got a million more.
Yeah. You know, Marty, I don't get it. If this is hell, then where are the little guys in red suits with horns? Right, Steve. These boys don't look like devils. They look like rejects from a Hell's Angels production of Godspell.
And the Cenobite's like, this is too much to bear.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I guess it's all torture for the Cenobites because they have to listen to their terrible jokes.
And every single thing they say is basically a joke. Like when they're backstage, one of them is turning to the other, said, "Man, we died out there," as they're picking out the chains off their face. And anyway, so wow. Fanoles, curtain going up, and 3, 2, 1. So they barely have time to go backstage, and then they're going out again.
Yeah.
And it's like, this feels like torture, not just for the Fanoles, but for the crowd that's outside as well.
And for us reading this book.
Right? Yeah. And so they make some sort of joke about Leviathan being multifaceted.
Oh, God, yeah.
Or, omnipointed instead of omnipotent and whatever. Yeah. So they're like, the bartender says, we're running low on bodily fluids here at the bar. So what do you say you retire those two Fanelli jokers for good? And then for some reason we discover that the bartender is actually one of the harrowers, and all he's got to do is take off this helmet mask thing that he had on. And then he says, it's soul saving time.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a bad joke in itself, I guess.
Yeah, right. And then he's the one that can heal instantly. Yeah,
Ron Ringwood. So he's here to save the Fanoles for some godforsaken reason.
Yeah, I know.
Because that's what the world needs, I guess.
Yeah.
So he takes them out, and it's really so easy. It's almost ridiculous. Like he just swings in a sash curtain to the stage. And then he grabs them, and then he uses that big sword knife thing he has to like slice a portal from hell to our world. And he just takes them back. And then, of course, in one panel, in one page, like we have all that thing where they're falling through the portal. Mordemame is explaining again, you have one day, do whatever you want, and then you're going to be turned into someone else. And so what they choose to do with that is just go back to their office and look at all the jokes they wrote and decide that, we're bad jokers. We're bad comedians. We're not any good. So, hey, what do you say we visit our mother? Because she's the only person that thinks we're funny.
So apparently they took 24 hours of going through their jokes. They could have spent that time with their mother instead.
Yes. Yeah. So and finally they go to the only person who thinks they're funny, their mother. And their mother is in it's called Cedar Lake Hospital, I guess. She's they abandoned her there.
At an old folks home. Yeah.
Yeah. And they just show up and say, "Hey Mom, what's worse than two sons that rarely visit? Two sons that never visit."
Yeah.
And it's okay. Yeah. They're just cracking jokes about their mom being in a home instead of actually saying something meaningful. So they're like, they call that a walker? It looks like you're doing all the walking.
Yeah.
I'm going to go.
It's like worse than Fozzie Bear.
Waka waka.
The thing that Morty Mommy turns them into is a two-headed dog. Why? Well, why would you do that to them?
Yeah, and so they're turned into a two-headed dog that kind of runs away, and then the nurse that was nearby gets so shocked that apparently she lets another gentleman from the retirement home go down a flight of stairs, hit a fountain, and fall inside where he's kind of drowning. Yeah. And that's what sets their mother off to laughing, and that's the end of the story.
Right, yeah, so, some poor old guy's probably going to die. That's hilarious, I guess.
That's very, very weird story. I understand the comedy of the last page, but it's like...
And this is how we send out the entire Marvel epic run of Hellraiser.
Yeah.
Some old guy falling into a fountain out of his wheelchair.
Yeah. So anyway, and then we have the other page that was the other page that was made by Shawn Martinborough, where you see some guy in a train getting chained.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's
then he wakes up and it was a dream, but then Pinhead is still sitting next to him, I guess.
On the train.
Yeah.
So that's it for the 20-issue run of Hellraiser.
Yeah.
A mixed bag of stories here. I like the girl in the peephole. I like the Wordsworth story, of course. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It could have just been that one. I mean,
yeah,
that would
it could have. Wordsworth
and
was
the last
amazing.
laugh.
The girl in the peephole was sort of okay, and the last laugh, no.
It's just filler, I guess.
Yeah.
So, well, what else do we have? A complete story that we can put in. Oh, well, we'll put this one in. It's got the Hair Wars, so we want to promote the Hair Wars that's coming out. But I just feel like so underwhelmed by the last story. It's really, really underwhelming.
Yeah. And
that's it.
So next we go into the Hellraiser 3 adaptation. And I think this suffers a little bit. Well, first of all, I mean, I don't know if I probably read this a long time ago, but if I did, I forgot about it, because the problem with it, to me, is, like when we read the Nightbreed comics and those first 4 issues that go through the events of the movie Nightbreed, you got a really good glimpse into what Nightbreed was supposed to be like before it got changed around.
Right.
Because it was done before the movie was done.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping for something like this with Hellraiser 3, but really there isn't very much different about it. It almost feels like, why'd you do this?
Yeah, well, this was back in the time when DC and Marvel were putting out comic book adaptations. I mean, there's a comic book adaptation of RoboCop 1 and 2.
Yeah.
There was a comic book adaptation of Conan the Barbarian, which actually is pretty good. But it was something that people did back in the late 80s, early 90s. It was like, oh, the movie is out, and then they would negotiate the rights to make a comic book release, and they would put it out because they know people would buy it.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, there's not much point to this one. I think it's more meant for people who didn't get a chance to see the movie, or people who are just completists.
Or to get people to go out and see the movie.
Yeah, sure.
But there were I made a few notes of things that were a little slightly different. There was where JP didn't know the barman's name. He at first called him like John, and she's like, "Isn't his name Rick?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's the barman, Rick, whatever."
Rick the bartend. Yeah. Sure. So the art is by Miran Kim, and the story, of course, is adapted by Peter Atkins from his screenplay, written by Peter Atkins and Tony Randell. Yeah. But I was a little underwhelmed by the artwork. But if I have to say something good about it, I'll give it this. They made a good job in synthesizing the story of the movie in 48 pages. They definitely did a good job.
It covers all of the major beats, but it does feel like it's a PG-13 version of the movie.
Yeah. Like when she's when Joey is in church and talking to the priest, and Pinhead shows up, instead of saying, "What the fuck is that?" she says, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah. And there's all of the swear words have been replaced like that, and the violence too has been cut out. So
right.
You don't see the guy's head exploding in the hospital. You don't see all of the people getting speared and stuff in the boiler room. You just see the aftermath.
Right, because this is a Marvel comic, so they still probably wanted to sanitize that a little bit. That's okay, but that's the only thing that I have to say good about this is that the artwork is passable. Yeah. I'm sorry, Miran Kim, you did the art for this, and you did a good job, like depicting the movie beat by beat. And like I said, that's pretty much the entire movie. Yeah. But the artwork is just a little underwhelming for me.
There was a really cool line from Pinhead that I wished was in the movie. He says, "I am a dark star rising, bound to another system by a soul I once possessed. My god was diamond and black light, and I his pope.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's like, man, I wish he had said all that in Hellraiser 3. It would have done just a little bit more to tie it to Hellbound, you know, and
right.
But,
yeah.
So it sounds like a line that was probably in the original script and edited out.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about Peter Atkins writing dialogue for Pinhead. He knew exactly what to put on the page to make Pinhead sound almost, immediately regal and seducing and, really talented with words, to the point where he actually seduces J.P. Monroe, right? His promises of power and all that stuff. And
yeah. I think, but then there's one line that when there's the video cassette with Kirsty, the Kirsty interview, and she says it's a gateway to hell or the South Bronx. It's like, what? I didn't.
Yeah. Right. There's little bits and pieces here and there that make the story a little different.
Yeah. Yeah. That one was strange. Seemed like lost in translation, maybe, or I don't know.
So, but definitely, good stuff here in terms of getting all the beats of the story right. And at the end, when you see. Yeah, like for example, the massacre at the boiler room, it's very, very short. I mean, it's basically just half a page. It's just 3 panels of people dancing. There's a hum that starts getting people's attention behind the door, the bartender, and then it explodes with chains and Pinhead says, "Shall we begin?" And that's all we see from the boiler room scene. Yeah. Which is okay, I guess. I mean, it's more of a visual thing than a comic book.
Right, I guess it would have taken a lot of panels to show all that.
Yeah, but you gotta love these onomatopoeias that people use in comic books. Like people made fun of that with the Batman TV show. When Batman punched someone, you see like pow, wham. Yeah. Right? So here Pinhead opens up the door to the boiler room, and the noise that they decided to go with is ka-choom.
Yeah.
See that?
I remember
right there, ka-choom.
There was an X-Men one time where a bathroom exploded and it said bathroom. Like just, just bathroom.
Right. The actual word is bathroom. I get it. Yeah. That must have been written by the Fanolis. God. Anyway.
But and there's this scene we talked about before where, there was the news report and then her TV turned out to be unplugged. So
they even included that shot of Ready for Your close-up, Joey.
Yeah. But in the comic, it didn't make sense the way the art was done, because she was talking to the guy face to face, right? And then all of a sudden, the camera had gone through his head and he's turned around the other way. So they skipped the part where he saw the guy and
right. And then there's also the scene where the gasoline and Barbie and throws a shaker of gasoline on top of the police car and breathes fire.
Yeah, that part is really truncated and it almost like. The introduction of these other Cenobites is so short that you don't really get to see them at all.
No, you don't. But you know what? It's okay. I mean, that part is kind of cheesy anyway.
Yeah.
But so Joey makes it to the construction site, and of course, she gets to see the other Cenobites show up and Pinhead, and it's very, very quick. But she says the thing, play with this, Pinhead, and she solves the box, and we get the scene with her father. That's really Pinhead. And then that sequence with Bondage and Joey being strapped and this machine that comes out from hell. Yeah. And that was written by Clive Barker, wasn't it?
Yeah, right. And it's hard to make the artwork makes it hard to make out what's going on, which in the movie you can see it clearly, but it's like it looks like a turd coming up out of the ground in the art.
It does. It does. And there's, for some reason, one of these pages seems like he just did the whole artwork with like a marker. Because it's also, of course, like you see Joey's arms when she's hanging. You see the arms.
Yeah,
they try to make shading
marks.
with like a.
Yeah, they're so thick that it looks like she's got hairy arms.
Yes, exactly, right? Like he's trying to do the shading, but it was done with like a very thick ink brush or something, and it just makes her arms look like super hairy instead of being the shading.
And
so
some of those little shading hatch marks even go out of the panel.
Yeah, they do. So I'm sorry, but the artwork is a little underwhelming. And but anyway, she escapes, and Elliot Spencer merges with Pinhead, and she took Pinhead through her window in her mind, right? That was the thing.
Yeah, I think there was a little.
And then she puts the cube
that wasn't in the movie. I'm trying to. What was that?
Oh, you mean at the last sequence? Yeah. No more hope of heaven, but I drag this demon down with me, right?
Yeah, and all you are is appetite, all your wit, all your erudition you got from me. The good news is you're getting it back. I think that wasn't in the movie, right?
That wasn't in the movie, no.
Yeah.
So anyway, after that sequence, we see Joey pushing the box into the construction site cement, and then she leaves, and then it says 2 years later, and it seems like it's Joey, or is that?
No, I
can't tell. I think it's
that
I think it's a puzzle guardian from the beginning,
but it's just really bad. The art makes him look exactly like Joey.
Like, yeah, because sometimes it's hard to understand what Kim Moran's art, but it says beautiful, isn't it? He's saying that to some strangers because he's just some guy like kneeling on a garden, and he looks up, and then we see the building at the end of Hellraiser 3.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more obvious. Well, it's obvious in the movie, but in this one, it's really a lot more obvious that every single area that you can put the panel or the box has the panels of the box, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So that was, like you said, it doesn't really bring anything new to the table apart from some minor cosmetic changes to the story here and there. One line here, another line there. But I was a little underwhelmed by the artwork, even though it does a great job synthesizing the movie into 48 pages.
Yeah, it does. And then we go into Spring Slaughter, which maybe I didn't give this quite the chance because I was so tired when I was reading this. But a lot of it doesn't make sense, and I had trouble knowing which characters are which and what's going on. I just had a hard time following it.
I had a fun time reading this, and I guess I can explain that if I can answer that as we go along. But I'm sure some of your confusion is probably due to the artwork as well here and there, and sometimes it's not obvious. You see one character dressed in a certain way, then you see him in a different situation, and that might be harder to understand who they are. But so it's a story in 2 acts, kind of, right? So I would say that it had 2 acts. So in 1 act, it opens with a man escaping hell. Okay. So if you haven't read the Books of the Damned, and I think at this point they had already come out some time ago.
And I remember this character Isidore Klaus, right, from Books of the Damned, and I think there was already
Isidore Klauski.
Yeah, and we had already seen this where he cut off my leg and turn it into a weapon, right?
Yeah, I think that we knew about that because I had already read this book years ago. So I don't know if I brought it up or you brought it up. But what happens in the Books of Blood is that...
I remember it as a comic, so maybe it was this then.
Right, because Isidore Klauski appears in the Books of the Damned as the guy who wrote Of Hell.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be this book from this guy who escaped, and then we see some pages of it, some mock pages, and stuff like that. And we see a cover, right? The cover that says Of Hell, Isidore Klauski. And so this guy used to be an occultist, and he disappeared in the 1800s, I think. But so anyway, the opening of this comic book involves him escaping hell. And he appears back in a hospital he disappeared from 60 years ago or something.
Yeah, right. And they're like,
so, and then
he would be 160 years old. That can't be him.
Yeah. So there's a journalist, I think, or some guy appears and he wants to ask questions to the guy, and he's saying, I'm telling you, this guy is Isidore Klowski. And they say, don't be ridiculous. The man hasn't been identified because the media learned that some guy appeared naked, holding a box, claiming to be someone who died 60 years ago. Of course, the news made it that, we don't know who this guy is. He's being kept at this institution for some reason. I don't see how that would become a thing for the media, but I guess it would definitely be a strange event. So anyway, some people hear about this event and they show up. And there's this one guy, and then he wants to talk to the patient. They say, no, you have to leave before he calls security.
Mm-hmm. And he says, do you like
when he's
puzzles?
outside,
and she says, no, I detest them, or something like that. And he says, oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. And so when he comes out, he meets another couple who's trying to come into the hospital to talk to the same guy, Isidore Klowski. And it's a nun and a priest, and they strike a conversation, right? And they say, well, I know why you're here, and I think I know what we're doing here. And then they kind of get together. And what happens is that these people are also people who have escaped hell at one time, right? There are people who have also been in hell, and somehow they managed to escape, just like Frank does in Hellraiser, whether someone spilled blood on the place where they died, and there was enough of them there to bring them back, or they escaped hell through other means, like opened the doorway somehow. And so now what they're doing is they're creating this team where they destroy boxes, and they kill puzzle guardians, I think.
And so I don't know exactly where this fits in the timeline, but I'm guessing this Spring Slaughter special happened long before there were Harrowers, and
Yeah, so this came out in the spring of 94. Hellraiser 20 came out in 93. So this, I think at this point, the Harrowers might have been out already, so I don't know. Yeah. But this was written by Lana Wachowski, and that's why I guess she brought back the character of Isidore Klowski, I guess, because that's from the Books of the Damned that they also wrote, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so
John Rossum and the Wachowskis.
It makes me wonder if this was an old back catalog story that they had never put out, but maybe was finished, so they made a spring special. Yeah,
I like the expansion of the mythology that this comic brings, because they bring these Cenobite monsters that their only job is to hunt back people who escape from hell.
Yeah, and they're gruesome looking. They're great designs. Total monsters.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of remind me of the Engineer a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good point. Their job is to, apparently they can come out of hell on their own, and then they hunt down these people to bring them back into hell. So what happens is that while Isidore Klowski is in hell by himself, is in the hospital by himself in a cell, one of the Cenobites appears to try to capture him back. And just before that can happen, I think he bites his own tongue, draws a glyph on the wall of his cell, and that gives him some sort of reprieve, and the Cenobite goes away. Because let's not forget that Isidore Klowski is a occultist, so he knows magic. So and that's how he manages to escape. And that's around the time when the trio of people who were trying to talk to him break into the sanatorium to rescue him. So they come with guns, and just as the nurse is looking at the ripped door that the demon just ripped out, she says, call the police. And then these people are here.
What's
and they say, we're going to take him.
She's having sex with the security guard or something, and then she's like, oh, I better go check on him, sort of nonchalantly. Yeah. She leaves without her shirt on, and she goes over and checks on him with no shirt on.
Right. I guess she was just going to look through the slot and see what was going on with Mr. Klowski. Anyway, so they escape, and then you get a good look at the creature that's trying to hunt them back. And so we get this cool predator vision thing where we see the monster looks at them, and he sees them as skeletons, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like a heat vision, but they can see through the flesh into the bone underneath, and it's got like X-ray vision. And so
and
these
he
people
launches these hooks, these barbed hooks out of his arms.
Yeah, that strap around or through your flesh, and then just he drags you back to hell like that.
Yeah.
So that's cool. And one of the guys that's introduced simply for the purpose of being captured, he's a totally generic person, right? Because we saw the guy with the mustache, or the guy with the raincoat, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and then the priest and the nun, and then all of a sudden there's 4 people rescuing Isidore Klowski, and one of them gets captured.
Like a red shirt.
That guy was not there. Yeah. He's like the red shirt, right? So, and then they leave. They go to this cabin, and that they go to this little cabin which apparently used to belong to Mr. Klowski. And he just explains to them that, yes, I wrote that book that you guys read. I escaped once. I think Leviathan allowed me to escape. And I'm not sure if I managed to escape. I don't remember solving the puzzle before I escaped tonight. And then one of the guys says, well, I destroyed a lament configuration tonight, and that might have helped you escape hell. And so this is like the scientist guy, which in the book he's described as an atheist for some reason.
Yeah,
like that,
I didn't get that
like that
either.
means anything. Because you've been to hell. You know hell exists.
Yeah.
So
right, yeah. And
they still, yeah.
There's like a part where somebody
then again,
says, like, Leviathan is our god, and I know you atheists aren't comfortable with that, or something like that.
Yeah. I guess this is around the time when people still like to say that hell was just another dimension.
Yeah.
It didn't really mean that that there was a god or heaven or something.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that comes closer to heaven is Morte Mame, who's this force of creation, right? Like she is renewal and creation, whereas Leviathan is more like order and discipline. So anyway, the weapon that Isidore Klowski offers to these people is that he tells them that their bones have been changed from being in hell. And I guess it's like when Frank sticks his fingers in the back of someone's head to suck out their blood.
Yeah.
So it's like when they come back from hell, they're not entirely human, right? They're kind of different.
Yeah.
So there's some sort of change that happens to you in hell. And I think in this one, he said that he just cut my leg because my leg is like, it's useless. My leg is because the monster that was trying to capture him kind of threw this skewer right through his leg, and he said, well, my leg is useless. You can go ahead and cut it with the saw.
Yeah, make a big pointy stick out of his femur.
Yeah, or his shin bone. Yeah. So he tells him to do that, and he says, I'm giving you a weapon. Now if you sharpen this bone, you can use it against the demons, because this is made out of Leviathan's stuff, I guess. So it's hellish in nature, so you can kill demons with it. And then, of course, just as he says that, there's a demon at their door, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and one interesting part is when they cut his leg off and make this thing out of it. It's like, oh, he'd been through torture for hundreds of years. This should have, but it still felt more painful and somehow more real.
Right. And they kind of go into that a little bit in the story, like the fact that they could get tortured and torn apart in hell, and then they couldn't die. So there's no real loss there, right? I mean, they would just get their pieces sewn back, or their body would regenerate from like a drop of blood even, and they would just get a new body so the torture could start again. So I guess once there is the feeling of loss added to the pain, it just kind of makes it more definitive.
Yeah.
Like when they cut his leg off. So
yeah.
And this priest, he likes to yell a lot, right? I mean, there's one time when he stabs the demon and goes like, hurrah, how does it feel? And then not even that long afterwards, he kills the demon again. He goes like, hey-rah! And it just keeps saying that. It's either hey-rah or hey-ya. It just keeps like saying that when he shoots at demons, when he stabs at demons. I guess that's his thing.
The design of this demon is crazy too. He's got his lower jaw is detached and it's hanging by strings from his face. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I don't know how that would operate, but anyway. So they do that, and then Isidore Klowski says, "Hey, leave me here. I'm tortured. My leg is cut off. I'm just done with this. I'm 160 years old. Just leave me here with a gun, and I'll kill myself. I don't want to go back to hell." But then what he really means is that he wants to stay there so he can buy the other guys some time. So he thinks that he can put some fragments of bone in the gun and kill the demon and save the other people. But unfortunately, he misses somehow, even though we see the gun go right through the demon's head.
Yeah.
And he says, the bullets covered with bits of bone penetrate the armor, but the hunter staggers and again returns to its task.
Yeah, didn't he
put
the gun up to his hand and then shot through his hand so that the bones would go into the bullets somehow?
That's true. Yeah, that's what he did, right? Yeah, that's what he did. You're right.
It seems a little far-fetched that would work.
Yeah, it does a little bit. Anyway, so the truth is that the priest came back because he said, "Oh, I heard more gunshots and nobody misses their head 4 times." So he just got back just in time to stab the demon in the back with the big femur thing. So, or the shin bone. Yeah. So they escape the hut. They burn it down. Isidore Klowski dies, left behind. And so the only 3 guys left now is Lee, the scientist, the nun who's called Helen, and the priest whose name is Garcia. And the next point we see is they're in Toledo, Spain, and they're hunting one of the puzzle guardians, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is kind of where, I guess, I don't know, this is kind of where the story started getting confusing to me. After the first one. Well,
Isidore Klowski also tells them that Leviathan is planning something, but he doesn't remember what. So that they needed weapons to counter Leviathan's efforts and destroy as many boxes as they could. So yeah, these people kill guardians. They kill one guardian and they get one of the keys from the guardian. Apparently, this is something that allows them to come back and forth from hell at will.
Oh.
These little pendants that the puzzle guardians have. So they get that. They shoot an old lady. They say, "Whoa, is she just an old lady?" No, she's a puzzle guardian. And so after they shoot her, they're trying to find the key. They find the key, and then the lady turns into like a bone dragon, right? A skeletal dragon. And again, you see Garcia the priest shout again like, "Hey-ya!" And he holds on to the skeletal dragon, and apparently the dragon flies up in the air like maybe 100 feet or more, and he shoots a big shotgun full of bone fragments into it, boom, 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 and then he falls down along with the skeletal dragon that turns into a pile of cinders. And apparently this may be because their bones are made of that weird kind of material, but he's still alive somehow. And they go back, and you see the nun is like stitching Garcia back together, and she's taking care of his injuries that he sustained, and they're romantically involved. There are some flashbacks about Garcia remembering the first time he was taken by the Cenobite when he opened the box, how he, tore apart his legs, and he stayed all night up in hell trying to bandage his legs because he thought he was going to die. It just regenerates, and the torture continues on for eternity. So that's an interesting point that it's going to have a payoff at the end of the story. And then, of course, Lee is trying to find a way to destroy more lament configurations, right? The scientist guy.
Yeah.
And,
So, and then who is this? There's this woman with the glasses, right? I mean, who... She just kind of did they just rescue her?
Well, okay, so the Lee is working in this. They think that Lee is working in the cellar one day, and they have this conversation at a abandoned church, talking about falling in love and talking about how they know they're not going to go to heaven. But when the time happens, when the time comes, they may have to do a suicide pact so hell doesn't take them. And again, this is going to be all a payoff at the end. But so, yeah, like you said, one day Lee comes in and he says that he found this woman outside and she must have passed out. And they think that she might be a plant, but Lee thinks that she's one of the people who escaped hell and needs her help. And there's one strange part here where he says, "Who is she? I don't know, but I found this in her pocket." And my comic book doesn't have anything on the piece of paper. Does yours have anything on it?
No.
For me, it's just a blank piece of paper. So I think someone forgot to put something here.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a misprint. Yeah, anyway. He shows them a piece of paper, and the piece of paper is blank in my little panel here. Yeah, so
same here.
I guess they forgot to put something in here, I guess.
Yeah,
and then Garcia says, yeah. So the thing is, like, she spends 3 days unconscious, and then they say, "Oh, we call that hell lag. If you escaped hell, then that's probably, you're one of us now." And there's no evidence here, except for that piece of paper, that we don't really understand, because in my copy, there's nothing there. But there's really no reason why they should think that she escaped hell just like they did, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what.
So that's where the story falls apart a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so you can tell that Lee is desperately trying to fall in love with someone, because I guess he resents the fact that Garcia and Helen are romantically involved.
Yeah.
And he just spends most of his time in their basement just trying to figure out a way to destroy lament configurations.
Yeah, so he's got a whole bookshelf full of them, which is like, well, where did he get all those? I don't think it was discussed before, right?
He shows this to the woman that he just rescued after 3 days. Like, he completely trusts her for some reason, and he takes her down and he explains that this is what we do. This is what we're trying to fight hell, the place that you've escaped from. And it's like, how do you know that she escaped?
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So that's where the story falls apart a little bit. So of course, one day Lee, the Helen and Garcia wake up one night and they hear noises, and they see that the cellar is lit up. And what happened was that Lee woke up in the middle of the night. The lady was gone. He went into the basement and discovered the basement was completely crowded with demons that had come to take them back to hell. I think the lady just opened up every box that he had showed her, and all these demons are there.
I know.
So... Right?
Yeah, right.
So,
they left her there for like, what, a month or something? Just open up every single box.
In one night, well, she was working for hell. She had to deal with hell.
Yeah.
But so Helen and Garcia wake up to hear the screams of Lee, and they see all the demons coming out from under the shed. And they go into the woods. They go back into that empty church that they were talking about earlier in the story. And they say, "Oh, this is it. I guess hell is right on our tail. We can't run anymore. And it's time to do our murder-suicide pact." So they kiss. Then Garcia kills her, and then he kills himself with a knife. And they lay side to side in church. And then it takes a moment, but then they just wake up again.
Yeah.
And they wake up because hell is already there in the church. They were just like hiding in like behind the doors, and these crazy looking Cenobite monsters appear and says, "Oh, loving is such sweet parting sorrow." And they're chained, Helen and Garcia, and they're separated and they're taken to hell. And he says, "I'll find you." And they just disappear in a puff of smoke.
Yeah.
And then the lady, Rachel, the lady that brought the Cenobites to these people, she's also taken. And she says, "No, we had a deal." And she said, "Well, the deal was for 4 people. And Isidore Klosky killed himself, so we're taking you to hell too." Ha, ha, ha.
God.
You can't trust hell, right?
I know.
So anyway.
Like this stuff always
and
happens.
Then this, for me, is where the book should have ended.
Yeah.
To be honest, because then there's an epilogue, and there's what I call Act 2 of the story, and I really don't think it's a good one.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about this one?
Well, no, I didn't. I was falling asleep while I was reading this part, but I didn't really understand what was going on.
So the epilogue for this, it opens up with Lee, the scientist, being tortured in hell. Okay, so the demon's like, oh, wow, I'm so lucky we got you back. You know how many demons want to, a chance at torturing you? Yeah, there's a big, long line outside.
Yeah.
You're a regular celebrity. And then Lee somehow grabs a knife from the Cenobite operating table and kind of slices his own stomach. And the Cenobite's like, no, what are you doing? I don't want to do that just yet. And he just sticks his hand in there and he pulls out one of the keys that he stole from the puzzle guardian. Oh. So he says, you can't kill me. He literally says that.
Yeah. Right.
And the demon's like, oh no, a key. And poof, Lee disappears. So he crosses back into our world. So he escaped hell.
Yeah. Then we're into part 3,
and
the Penitent.
Yeah, the Penitent. Again, very weird. So what we see is Lee back in his lab, and he's cutting his own finger, his own tiny little finger. He's cutting his little phalanxes from his small finger on his left hand, and he's going to turn those into
bullets, I guess.
Special bullets.
Yeah.
Right? Special bullets. Because now he's determined he wants to go back into hell, and he wants to save Garcia and Helen.
Does he regenerate that finger when he does that? I didn't understand.
He does not. No, okay. He does not. So he has the key with him, and what he does is he goes into an S&M club, and he finds this one guy called Lewis, and he's handcuffed to a urinal in a gay S&M club.
Right,
and he takes him home and he says, collar. He says, I want to play a game with you. And he says, I'm going to hang you up in this leather gimp outfit. I'm going to give you this box, and you're going to have to solve the box for me. And then when it opens, you're going to close it right away as quickly as you can. And then I'm going to be gone for an hour, and then I want you to open up the box again and close it again as fast as you can. So this is where I have lots of problems with the story, right? Because this is like, that's a terrible plan. That's not how it's going to work at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the plan is that when Lewis opens the box, Cenobite appears, a portal to hell appears. Bang, bang, Lewis shoots the demon, goes into hell, and he's going to go, in 1 hour, he's going to find Garcia and Helen. And I'm thinking to myself, how are you going to find them in hell in 1 hour? They could be anywhere. If we're talking about the puzzle labyrinth from hell.
Right, it's a whole world.
Okay, so, but this is where it gets crazier, because Lee has a dog, and his plan is that he's going to take some pieces of clothing from Helen and from Garcia, and he's going to give them to the dog in hell so he can sniff them, so the dog can point him where he wants to go.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, come on, again, it's ridiculous, right? I mean, I'm going to take a bloodhound to hell so I can find these people. It makes sense on the written page, but when you think about it for a minute, you're like, really? You're going to take a bloodhound into hell to track someone?
Yeah.
It's hell. It's like, it's okay. But let's not get too much into that. So Lewis opens it. Lee goes into hell, shoots a Cenobite in the face, goes into hell, gives the dog the nun habit, so they find what's left of Helen, and he smears like Helen's blood on his shirt because he's like, well, we'll do this because all they need to come back is to have some of their blood in our world, and then
he finds like her scalp,
open
right?
Right. So he just smears her blood on his shirt so she has a hold to come back into our world. And then he finds Garcia's body, and Garcia's just hanging off a bunch of hooks, and he's like chopped into pieces. And okay, so he grabs something from Garcia as well to go back. In the meantime, you see that Lewis, who opened up the box, is still waiting for Lee. And you see that there's a ring stuck to his nipple, and someone starts pulling that wire until it kind of rips the nipple out. And it's like, that's not Lee yet, so we know that there's a Cenobite, and he got to Lewis, so there's going to be a Cenobite waiting for Lewis on the way back. So when he arrives, he sees that Lewis has been killed, and the Cenobite is still there, and is like, but I shot you in the face. And is like, well, Leviathan is God here. You atheists had such a problem with that. So the demon still has smoke coming out of like the holes in his head.
Right.
But apparently Leviathan keeps him alive. Okay.
Yeah.
So he says, weird part at the end. He says, now as for you, you and your friends are free to go. Why would he say that? I have no idea. But I think he's gambling on the fact that since Lewis got chained into hell, that Lee would feel an obligation to go back into hell. So he's like, well, with Lewis added to your conscience, you'll have to try again. And we all know you can't solve them anymore because now he doesn't have a bunch of fingers, right? Or at least one.
It's not like Lewis was like his best friend or anything.
Right. I mean, of course, if you'd rather, you're free to stay. See you soon. But it doesn't make any sense because Lewis's bloody mask is there. There's pieces of Lewis hanging from chains. If he kills himself on top of these remains, all these three people will come back from hell, right? That's how it works. If you consider like Julia came back from the mattress, Frank came back from the remains that were hidden under the floor, or the semen on the floor. So for this would be the same. He doesn't have to go back into hell to rescue Lewis. He can just bleed on top of Lewis's mask and Lewis will come back from hell. Anyway, so the Cenobite apparently leaves and lets Lewis and his friends free. And Lewis, instead of just cutting a little cut in his hand and bleeding all over those three things, he just decides to shoot his own brains off. And then you see Helen's hand coming out of his shirt, and Garcia is also hinted at returning, and that's how it ends. It says, oh, Helen, is that you, Garcia? I feel heat. Oh, I can see the light. And then a hand comes out of Lee's body's chest, and that's the end. And I think, the story should have ended when Helen and Garcia got taken to hell, and that should have been the end of it.
Yeah.
I think this ending was a little underwhelming, and it just relies on this premise that, one, the Cenobite would leave without taking Lee back, which I don't believe would happen. And the other, that this mechanic is just super easy to bring people from hell. All you need is like get a piece of their remains, take it to our world, smear it on the floor, bleed on it, and someone will come back from hell. So why aren't, that's seems like a super easy way to do it. So, and at the end, Lee didn't have to kill himself. I guess he killed himself because he was guilty. But like I said, there's Lee's bloody mask, and he brought Helen's scalp or a smear of blood on his shirt, and he brought Garcia's remains as well, or at least his blood. So all he has to do is bleed a little bit on top of those three things. They would just come back. He didn't have to kill himself. But, I guess it adds to the drama of the story.
It's interesting too, I think, because in different stories have different ideas about what's happening when people come back, right? Because I think it's sort of hinted that when Frank escaped, maybe this is just with the Hellraiser anthology, but like when Frank escaped, it seems like he did something in hell to get out. It's not just the blood on the floor. Like he also was doing something to get it to escape hell when he was down there too.
You mean in the book, in the novella?
No, I mean in the Hellraiser anthology. When it's referred to, Frank escaping, it seems kind of
yes. Mm-hmm.
It seems like they refer to it like it doesn't usually happen and like Frank did some stuff in hell to be able to get out, not just Julia, or
in the Hellraiser anthology that was published by Seraphin. Yeah. But I know that these and I mean different. even in the novella, he is an active party in releasing himself from hell because he's stuck in that wall, right?
Yeah.
He's stuck in hell, but he looks into the room where he was killed. And when his brother's blood falls on the floor, it gives him – he uses all the strength that he has left to break through the dimensions. And you see the wall comes apart when Julia's in the room, and then he just tells her blood, and then it disappears again. Yeah. So he actually – contacts Julia on his own energy, right? He transfers himself through the dimension to give her a message, and that's all the energy that he had. to ask for blood. So, yeah, I understand that. Sure. Seems like he would have a sheer force of will. You have to have that sheer force of will also to bring yourself back.
Yeah. Well, and they have and their bodies are tougher because they have to survive torture in hell. So Frank can live with no skin
and they use this mechanic of the bloody mattress to bring someone back as well in Hellraiser Revelation, right?
Right. Yes. Yep.
The Mexico thing, I think. Yeah. I kind of erased that movie off my mind again.
Yeah, we watched it so many times for this podcast, and it's like, I hope that I never have to see it again.
You had to rent it twice or three times.
Yeah, I rented it twice, and then I bought it on eBay for like $3 the third time.
So from these three comic books that we talked about, like Wordsworth's the best story of all. I feel like the Hellraiser issue number 20 was the best one, the most fun one to read. I think this one, The Spring Slaughter, expanded the mythology in interesting ways, but at the same time, I feel like the whole setup for the epilogue of the story was a little underwhelming. I think it should have ended at the church scene when Garcia and Helen are taken. The ending didn't really make a lot of sense.
Monstrous Cenobite designs in the Spring Slaughter special.
Me too. Yeah. And as for the Hellraiser adaptation, I mean, Hellraiser 3 adaptation, it was serviceable, I think. Yeah. I was a little underwhelmed by the artwork, but I think it did a great job synthesizing the movie into 48 pages. So that's basically it. We still have 3 more comic books to go through, right?
Yeah.
We have the summer special and the poster book, which there isn't much to talk about. Yeah, basically, it's just a book of pinups.
And the holiday special.
The holiday special with Face, Balberith, and Atkins, right?
Yeah.
And so the hellish ornaments.
That'll be our last episode in this series. We'll do that in a couple of weeks. But yeah. I mean, it's been fun doing this Hellraiser Marvel Comics series and going through them and reading them all, because I don't think I ever read them all before.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I haven't read this Spring Slaughter in a long time.
Yeah.
And the Hellraiser 3 adaptation too, because like you said, you leaf through it and you see, it's just basically the movie, and it's like, I've seen it.
Yeah. Right.
So usually just put it in the bag and put it away. But I went through it and I noticed that, like you did, like there were some lines that were different, so that was interesting.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping there'd be more that was different. They were just really small, little, subtle things. And since it was adapted by Peter Atkins, it kind of makes me wonder if they were stuff that he had in the script, that he wanted in and just got edited out for time or whatever.
Yeah, I think Hellraiser 3 is one of those scripts that I've never really got to read ever, because I think it's kind of hard to find. Well, it's like the 1 and 2, you find it, and then
so many iterations of the Hellraiser 3 script too.
Right, that's true. All right, so that was it. That was it for Hellraiser Comics Part 7. There's going to be a Part 8 soon, and this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end.
Find the show notes for this episode and join the discussion over at www.clivebarkercast.com, where we have news and links to all the ways you can connect with us. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and every other place you can find podcasts. The Clive Barker Podcast is an independent editorial podcast and news blog that is not affiliated with or under contract by Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans.
Thanks for listening.